Yeah, as you said, I'm a graduate of 2002, 2003. If you take anything away from this talk, it's what I'm about to tell you. The reason I split years was I did my internship. As most of you know, your last 16 hours of sport management are an internship, and I was going to do it in the summer and fall of 2002. So I was leaving campus in May of 2002. So I went up to JRP that was recently renovated to fill out my application for degree that you have to fill out. And the day I walked in there, they had just opened the new building, and the advisor's office was right inside the door for all my 4 years. So I went to walk into her office, and there was some staff there, and like, oh no, you can't just walk in anymore, you got to go around to the office. So I went around to the office and walked in, and the girl at the desk said, what are you here for? I said, I'm here to fill out my application for degree, and here's CD. She said, oh no, you didn't do that here. So she gave me this half salmon colored piece of paper, and I filled out my application for degree, and she put it in the box, and off I went. Fall of 2013, I'm in law school, and Dee calls me and says, hey, how you doing? I said, good. She said, hey, I'm just going through some files, and you haven't graduated yet. Huh. Why is that? Because I don't know. Like, you have done all your courses, but you haven't filled out your application for a degree. I said, was that a little half salmon colored piece of paper? She said, yeah. I said, yeah, I did that a year and a half ago. So if you take anything away, make sure you fill out that half salmon piece of paper called the application for degree before you leave here, so that you don't go a full year of taking no classes and not getting your degree. And so Dee said, well, it seems like you're doing okay, you've gotten a job. I said, I'm in grad school. So luckily the law school was understanding. But again, my name's Kyle Vena. I'm the Director of Baseball Administration for the Kansas City Royals. I've worked for the Royals for 22 seasons. This is number 22, so since 96. Was my first year. I was a sophomore in high school at Blue Valley Northwest in Overland Park. And I started working, I kind of have a different track than most in the game. So I'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit about my role in the front office today, and then kind of where we're going. And then maybe give you guys some tidbits, advice on careers in sports, and maybe we can open up for questions. So I don't want to take the whole morning, the whole class. But as I said, I started in 96. I was a sophomore at Blue Valley Northwest, and I had a friend whose sister was an usher. And she got paid, it was like $36 per game to go stand at the top of an aisle. And me and my friends said, well, that'd be pretty cool. So I applied as a sophomore to be an usher. I got hired, and my first day on the job, I was originally assigned down by the left field foul pole. And opening day 96, 10 minutes in after the gates opened, the supervisor walks down and he said, are you afraid to tell people no? I said, no. It's all right, come with me. So that's when I got my first promotion. I got promoted to the aisle right behind home plate. For those of you who know baseball history and Negro Leagues history, Buck O'Neill was a scout for the Kansas City Royals. And Buck used to sit in the scout seats right behind the plate. He would sign autographs in between innings. And then everybody had to leave when the inning started, when the catcher threw to second. So the usher was responsible for shooing everybody off and telling them to come back. So my first promotion was because of Buck, 10 minutes into my job. So if anybody can match that track, it's congratulations. I'm pretty proud of that one. But I did that for actually 3 weeks before I got my next promotion. And it's because a college kid who was the bat boy was accepted into a study abroad program for the summer. And he was going to Spain. So they needed someone to start the next day. And they didn't want someone who was 18 who was going to be going back to college in August. So they asked me to be the bat boy. I was one of 3 male 16-year-olds on the entire game day staff. So I got my second promotion when I was 3 weeks in. So then it really slowed down, really slowed down. But I got to be the visiting team bat boy for 3 years, and then eventually the home team bat boy for 3 years. My years on the visiting side, I was the winningest bat boy in baseball because the Royals had the worst home record in all of baseball for those 3 years. But it was fun. It was an experience where, I was a kid. I was 16, 17 years old. I was sitting on the bench with Cowerton Jr., Ken Griffey Jr. It was a really kind of cool, unique experience. But it's really what got me excited about the potential of working in baseball. But I hadn't decided that just yet. And I know some of you are freshmen, sophomores, right? So when I got out of Blue Valley Northwest and came to KU in the fall of 1998, I actually came here wanting to be a radiologist. And I lasted about, half a semester, taking some classes I had zero interest in, and decided to change my major. So I don't know how many of you have already changed your major 1, 2, 3 times, but it's okay. That's all right. But I changed my major in the fall to journalism. And I know Sam Mallinger came last week and allegedly said some nice things about me. And if there's another thing you can take away, this is the second piece you all should write down, it's don't trust the media. So whatever he said, just get rid of it. But, Sam's good people. But I decided I want to be in journalism, and specifically broadcast journalism. And when I was going through that into my second semester of that, I said, well, it'd be good if I want to do broadcast journalism, maybe I should tie sport management with it too and do a double major. That was a good idea. And so I ended up doing that. Once I got into sport management, that's when I really started to get excited about the opportunity of just doing that, taking the broadcasting. So again, 2 major changes for those following along, and that's when I really settled in. And at that time, the sport management program was just kind of starting. I think there was only like maybe 40 sport management majors, and we were mostly with athletic training, and then all that, and we didn't have really any sports administration. So all my classes were biomechanics. We didn't have classes like this back then, which sucked, but at the same time, I was excited about it. And what it did was, by my senior year, we started instituting more administration type courses, and sports law was one of them. And for those of you who remember KU athletics history, I don't know if we've done anything on the athletic department, but Dr. Bob Frederick was the athletic director here forever. And Dr. Frederick retired my senior year and was going back into the classroom to teach. And his first class he was going to teach was sports law. And it was my sports law class. And it was really great that he was retired to go back to the classroom, but he had zero interest in teaching sports law. So he made the general counsel for the athletic department teach it, and Dr. Frederick sat in the corner. But when you talk about, the way things happen in careers and the way doors open, the general counsel at the time was Pat Warren, who I don't know if you talked about Pat. Pat's now the president of Kansas Speedway. And Pat, at the time, when he teaching this course, I fell in love with it. And I was at a point in my life where, again, I was worried about filling out my application for a degree, and I was worried about finding an internship. I knew I was going to do it with the Royals. But as an organization, the Royals didn't really offer internships yet in the front office. And I didn't know really what I wanted to do if it wasn't going to be with the Royals. I didn't know if I wanted to move to Cleveland and work in their front office, or Chicago and work in the White Sox front office, versus staying in Kansas City where my entire family is and doing something else in sport. So I had to come to a point where I had to really rely on people that I'd met, people that I knew, to try to seek some advice. And that's kind of a point, too, I want to do. Use your connections that you have, not to get you jobs, but to give you advice. Say it again. Use the connections that you have, not to get you jobs, but to give you advice. Always go get jobs on your own. That's the one thing that as a culture, we don't see as much. People just want to get the job because they know somebody. Now, really find something you're passionate about and go get it. But, again, going back to that, in using that idea, Pat Warren was one. I used a lot of players to talk to their agents because I said, well, maybe I want to be an agent. And that put me in touch with a woman named Judy Heater. Judy was, at the time, the head of all Major League Baseball Players Association licensing. And her husband, Jim, is a civic leader in Kansas City. So she's pretty well connected. And so I got in touch with her. I got in touch with some people in the front office and just some friends of my parents. And law school kind of came up. I was in that sports law class. Pat Warren's the one who finally said, you should go do this. I think it'll benefit and you'll enjoy it. So then I was at a point where I said, okay, well, now I'm going to law school. Literally like 6 months from needing to take the LSAT, and I decided, well, so it's kind of a major change in that in itself. So again, now I'm on a 4. And so I take the LSAT, I applied to KU, UMKC. My intention was to keep my foot in the door and still work for the Royals. I got into both, but decided that law school was going to be really, 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 really hard, and I was going to be in the library all night. And if anybody thinks that's what law school is, just scrap that. It's really not that hard. And if you have any desire to go to law school, I recommend it. I loved it. It was, again, me not really ever wanting to be a lawyer and not knowing that I was going to go until later in my life. It wasn't at all what I expected, and it was awesome. But what it does is it teaches you tools that really will be successful in anything you do. I don't recommend going just to not have to go get a job and buying yourself 3 more years. But if it's something that maybe the legal profession or maybe a course you've taken that's kind of opened your eyes to that, has kind of piqued your interest a little bit, go look into it. But anyway, so I applied to but I ended up going to UMKC again because I thought I was going to be in the library at all hours of the night. I was gonna be running back and forth from the stadium, and he said it really wasn't like that. I kind of needed a full-time job for me, so I'd go to law school at 8 o'clock in the morning and stay till 5, and I'd get all my reading done, and then that was it. But what law school did is it really teaches you to think differently. Going to law school doesn't, you don't read all the cases and memorize all the law, and then you just know how to solve any problem. It just teaches you how to research, how to analyze problems, how to listen, how to communicate, and then apply the ability to go research and solve problems. And honestly, that's what got me to where I am today, was my 3 years. And not because I'm an attorney, but just the way I think, critically think, actually helps me give a different perspective in sport than a lot of others. So whether it's a trade that we're doing, whether it's a stadium issue that we're having, I don't do a lot of the true legal work for the Royals, the slip and fall cases on a curve, that stuff I don't know, I'm part of that. But if there's any baseball-related legal stuff, immigration I do, I enjoy it. And again, I've been given an opportunity to do more because I, again, think differently than my peers. So that's kind of was my track. Once I got out of law school, that's when what brought me to a time where the Royals started doing interns in the front office. So my timing kind of worked out too, and that's kind of another thing I want to point out when through this talk is, in addition to using your contacts to help you kind of develop a passion and go chase a job, the other thing, you got to be patient. It's really hard to get a job in sport. You all are lucky because Kansas City has a lot of opportunity, but in the world, there's a lot. It's really hard to get a job in sport. Namely because you can look around at the 30 general managers in baseball, and most of them are in, it's probably their average, probably all of them have been a general manager for at least 8 years. I've never done that. Maybe more than that. So you're talking 30 jobs in the world, and they're not turning over, ever. There's only 30 director of baseball administrations in the world. There's only 30 farm directors, 30 scouting directors. It's really hard to get in, specifically to baseball, but it's hard to get in anything. And so if someone tells you, hey, we'd really like to hire you, but we don't have internships, we don't have opportunity, you just got to be patient. If it's something you really want, you figure out a way to do it. And then I'll talk a little bit about ways you can work around that problem toward the end. But again, when I got out of law school, as I said, the Royals started offering internships, and the general manager at the time, his name was Allard Baird, and Allard told me, he goes, basically he'd known me through the last 6 years. He said, when you get out, you'll be the intern. So I had an internship lined up out of law school, and the year with the Royals were not very good. They hadn't been very good for a while, for those of you who grew up in the area. And he got fired that May, the end of May, and Dayton Moore, who's our current general manager, was hired. And so, again, being patient, timing, there was kind of a transition period, which, again, helped me get a job. If Allard had gone through the year, we as an organization weren't expanding our offices or anything like that, I probably would have done the internship and I'd be doing something else. But because he got fired and Dayton came in, Dayton created 15 jobs in that offseason and created one for me. So again, timing worked in my favor again. So I consider myself very lucky to be where I'm at, just because of the things that happened in my life leading up to that point. But when Dayton came in, and I'll speak a little bit about our front office now, today, and kind of where we came from. Dayton came into an office that was about 5 people. There was a scouting director, a farm director, an assistant general manager, a director of baseball operations, and the general manager, and 3 administrative assistants. That was it, and the intern. And so Dayton came in, and he came into with a lot of hype. And again, as I said, we weren't a very good organization. And he walked in, and before his very first meeting, his very first press conference, he called a meeting for the group that was working in baseball operations. And again, he had, at that point, had turned down the Boston Red Sox general manager job. He turned down the Cleveland Indians general manager job, and I think he turned down the Angels, but he won't. But he sat us down again before he went to the very first press conference, and he said, the first thing he said was, "You will never miss another important day in your life. You will never miss an anniversary or birthday." That was the very first thing he said, and that it speaks a lot to him and speaks a lot to working in sport, that to be successful, you have to take care of your family at home. Take care of the things that drive you, because if you want to be successful in your career, you got to make sure your life's in order. And that's something that he brought, and as I tell the story, we'll explain more to why that was the first thing he said. But it kind of shocked me, because here's a guy who's coming in with all this hype, and the first thing he says is make sure you never miss your kid's birthday again. Cool. That sounds great. And then he said we're going to win a World Series in Kansas City. And again, for those of you who followed us and knew how bad we were all like, all right, this guy better be pretty good. And he said the way we're going to win a World Series is we're going to become the model organization. And the way that we're going to become the model organization is we are going to develop the best scouting player development department in all of baseball. And then the last thing he said was still to this day the only directive he's ever given me or anybody else, and he continues to give it, but it's the only order we've ever received from him in the now 11 years we've been together. He said, we will treat every player in our organization like he's our own son. Treat every player like he's our own son. In anything we wanted to do, and I've since worked in amateur scouting, I've worked in player development in the minor leagues, I've worked in the major leagues, I've watched most of our team play as amateurs and then all the way through the system. Everything we did in all those years, if we wanted to buy a pitching machine, if we wanted to bring in a guest speaker, if we wanted to hold an off-season strength and conditioning camp, whatever it was, we said, if Eric Hoffman was my son, if he was Owen Vena, would I do it? Is that the best interest for him? We didn't have to ask permission. We did it. And we created an organization where, by doing that, people wanted to work, players wanted to play, families knew that their sons were in good hands, and we built this culture. And that was the only directive we got, and that's what we do. We treat our players like they're our own sons. And we built this organization that in 2015 culminated with a second World Series trip and finally a championship. But we did it with a group on the field who really felt like they came up and grew up together. We had family members, parents of them, who were down there celebrating with the front office because they felt like they did it together. We created a culture where, as an organization, everybody felt like they were a piece of this. Another thing he says a lot is he reminds us that all our success is tied together. And that's very important for all of you to know is when you're working in sport, there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things, especially if you work for a major franchise. You know, there's a lot of people. Next week, Megan Mackey's coming to talk, and before I walk out of here, remind me to say something about Megan Mackey. But there's a lot of people who do sponsorship, tickets, community relations, finance, so many things that we can't operate and be successful unless everybody's pulling the rope. And all of our success is tied together. So we now work in an organization where we don't work harder than anybody else. It's impossible to work harder than anybody else. If anybody in here says, I want to work in sport and I'm not going to work hard, you're not going to work in sport. Everybody who works in sport works really hard. It's hard to outwork people. It's hard to be smarter than people because there's a lot of really smart people who work in sport. But one thing we can't control is we say we care more than anybody else. But we're going to invest our lives in making sure the organization is priority number one, and we're going to care more than anybody else. And that's kind of the culture that Dayton's built throughout our organization and really created a wonderful place to work. We are the model organization. We do things outside of the box that MLB calls us all the time and says, hey, I hear about this. How does this work? And I walk them through it. And then I tell them about 3 other things we're doing, and it just blows their mind. And they say, we're going to tell all the clubs to do this. We say, okay. And they push it out to all the clubs, and no one does it. Because they don't care. Right? And that's okay. I mean, teams have different reasons for how they're successful. But you got to invest. You got to invest in your players. You got to invest in your organization. You got to invest in your peers. And that's what really has led us to have the successes that we have today. So that's kind of the track of the organization. And then kind of my background of what I did in all those years was after being the intern, I was the baseball operations assistant for a year. And that was mostly kind of helping out in all areas, but mostly in pro scouting. We were in transition period that first year, doing a new scouting system and collecting reports and trying to figure out what we had. And after that, I became the assistant to amateur scouting, which was an opportunity to really do a lot, prepare for the draft. I go out and scout mostly locally, but I go out to a lot of the showcase events. I was responsible for really speaking to parents about the Royals organization and really developing our message of why you should consider the Kansas City Royals, take away everything you know about the last 8 years, and this is why your son should play here. And again, that goes back to where, as their families, we started to develop those relationships. Then I kind of transitioned to where I was doing both amateur scouting and player development. That was the most work I've ever done in my life, never will do in my life for those 3 years. It was also the most fun I ever had. And because I got to see in the amateur scouting world, high school players all over the country, college players all over the country, see them drafted, and then I would also see them when they're playing in the minor leagues. So I got to watch, whether they were with us or not, I got to see players that I scouted as an amateur and see them in the minor leagues, and that was really rewarding and really incredible experience. Now, most of those players, not most of them, but players that are now in the big leagues, I saw at that level. And then the last job before my current was assistant farm director, where all I worried about was the minor leagues and really developing that culture we had throughout and working in that regard. So now today as a director of baseball administration, my duties kind of are wide-ranging. It's mostly at its core worried about the major league team and the administration side. So payroll, contracts, arbitrations, all those kind of boring things that sound fun. They're not as fun as they sound, but we can ask questions about any of those if you want. And then outside of that, as I said, because I'm an attorney, they handed me the visa program, the immigration program, and I also oversee our international program, so our Dominican Academy, which is way more fun than arbitrations, but the Dominican Academy, I oversee the kind of the administration of that, as far as budgets, everything goes on, and managing that facility. And then what's kind of come up the last couple of years is a facility we're building downtown in Kansas City at 18th and Vine, the Kansas City Urban Youth Academy. And that I got kind of brought into that because of 2 reasons. One, Dayton, again, caring more than anybody else, is really worried about the state of youth baseball and where it's going, and these showcase events are making it very expensive. It's a very important initiative of the commissioner, but it's something Dayton was ahead of because he had his own son that he was watching. By the way, if you want to write down his name, Robert Moore, that should be on the final. He's going to be a dude. He's a freshman, Shawnee Mission East. He's one of the best shortstops in the country. Freshman class. But he, seeing his son going after these tournaments and showcase events, it really makes someone who's proud about the sport and proud about baseball sick. Seeing the way that these academy programs are being run and these travel ball teams are eliminating opportunity for other kids. And so he said we want to build become another model and build a model urban youth academy, a model training center for youth baseball. So it's something he's brought me into, and we're working on together downtown, and that's an awesome project. And we've talked, George, about, that's probably a good opportunity for internships for sport management majors, looking toward that's close by and provide a lot of opportunity there. So those are things I think that would be good to open up questions on, so kind of remember those. And then I want to talk a little bit about just working in sport. Take me out of it, take the worlds out of it. But something I like to talk to when I talk to groups like this, why you're lucky about being in the Kansas City area. And some of you may, every year that goes by, people don't even know this, but the NCAA used to be in Kansas City, in Overland Park, up until like '93. And it moved to Indianapolis from Kansas City, but because it was here for so long, there's a lot of ties and offices that support the NCAA. There's a compliance a law firm in right at 435 and 69 Highway in Corporate Woods that does all the compliance audits for NCAA. So any athletic department that gets any red flag that goes up, they go in and start the audit. That's a chance to work in and around Kansas City and be able to travel the country and work in college athletics. There's the Center for Drug-Free Sport, which is an incredible organization. They do all the drug testing for the NCAA. They do all the drug testing for minor league baseball. They do the PGA, the NFL, the NBA, and they're in downtown Kansas City. There's a small office right behind the Boulevard Brewing Company, and they travel. Their employees travel the world. Again, an opportunity to work in sport and travel the world, managing the collection of urine. Really, blood and urine, and but they are the number, and they do the Olympics, and they are the center Center for Drug-Free Sport, but they are the #1 collection agency, and they're a tremendously successful company. It's a local company that got started because of the NCAA being here, and they had relationships with them when they wanted to get into drug testing, and it's taken off to where now they do all the major sports. So there's someone who just travels to the Masters every year and just around to tell PGA golfers when they come off the 18th, hey, you got drug tested. Pretty cool, right? how exciting it is. Some people think it's awesome. But there's an opportunity to work in sport that's not with Sporting Chiefs, the Royals, different things. The NAIA in Kansas City has opportunity to work in any sport that's under their umbrella, and from an administration side. Obviously, the college basketball experience, the Kansas City Sports Commission is probably one of the most underrated assets we have in our community, period. They are one of the best, if not the best. I'll tell a little story about them and how they get to work with anything. Their job as the Kansas City Sports Commission, I don't know how many of you are familiar with them. Kathy Nelson's their executive director, and so their job, their function is to bring major sporting events to Kansas City. They recruit, they do the bid process. They're the ones getting the National Ice Skating Championships or at the Sprint Center. They're the ones who go out and get the NCAA Regional to become the Sprint Center. They get they're out doing it. If we were going to go to Super Bowl, they're the ones leading the bid pack for that. And they go out and they recruit every major sporting event they can to bring it and help work it and put it on and do all those things, and it's awesome. They also put on all the marathons, 5Ks, all those types of things. But they're a group of people who get to work in and around sport, again, which is probably all what you want to do, and get to work with different sports. They're not just working baseball like I do every day, or football, or soccer. They work with Speedway, they work with everybody, and so they get so many different things that come their way that makes it fun. So we went to, I don't know how many of you may have heard in opening day 16, so a year ago we did a ceremonial first pitch from Union Station to the stadium. It's called Relay the Way, where 2,500 people played catch in the streets of Kansas City on opening day, and that was April 5th when that April 3rd when that happened. We got the idea from the VML marketing firm like the last week of January, and said we should do this. I went, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool. How are we gonna do it? Well, first person said go to Kathy Nelson, go to the Sports Commission, and we went to them like the second week of February and said we want to do this. And Kathy said, well, have you opened registration? No. How many people do you need? I don't know. You getting about t-shirts? I don't know. What about restrooms? What about concessions? Don't know. When is this event? It's April 3rd. That's in 7 weeks. Okay, we'll do it. And they literally did it. And then they went out and just absolutely scrambled, pulled their staff together, and put on an event that now I got a call from the Blue Jays that the city of Toronto wants to do it. And they literally just dropped everything and got to put on one of the coolest events that I think has ever been done, with 2,500 people throughout our community coming together with residents standing outside front of their houses throwing a baseball. And it ended up being this really stupid idea that they said, we'll jump at, and they put it on. And it ended up being a way that history of sport in Kansas City will be looked at as just a cool event that they did. So there's opportunity really to do anything. And I didn't get into all the major, obviously the athletic department here, UMKC. You can work in a lot of different athletic departments, work in sports. So you all are very fortunate going to school here that you can start building the relationships and have the contacts when you get out to work, again, in and around sport, just because of your proximity. So that's really cool. So that's it for kind of what I wanted to talk about. I'm sure there are questions, and I can talk all day on some of those topics, but feel free to ask if anybody has anything specific or anything I said you want me to go more in depth on. No? Okay.
So when you're approaching a season and, or whether you're in the season, you've got to make a trade with somebody, like what is the labor process like, and how do you guys go through those types of attrition, from a business side and personally?
Would you trade Hawthorne right now?
You asking me?
No, so basically the way that works, we have a staff, a pro scouting staff, who is constantly evaluating. We have a professional scouting director who knows every organization up and down from their Dominican Summer League all the way to the Major League team of how we view every player in their organization. And then we have players that we really target looking at, we look at our roster internally almost 4 years out. 3 years for sure, we'll kind of start looking forward based on our contracts, based on who we have come to the minor leagues. So we start looking at where our needs are in 20 and 21 so that we can start looking at if Tampa calls and wants a player, we know who to ask for that may be on their A-ball roster. That may be our favorite player. We know he's 3 years old. So we have to know every organization where they are, what the track of those players that are lower levels, the track of players who are higher levels, so we know kind of what it is. When we traded Will Myers, for example, Let me go back to that. Let me go back to Greinke. So Greinke, we knew if we were going to trade Zach Greinke, some of you may not know he used to pitch for the Royals because it's been a long time now. But Zach Greinke had won a Cy Young with us, and everybody wanted Greinke, right? Of course, he was the greatest pitcher in baseball at that time. He had 2 more years of control. And we weren't really motivated to move him because we needed Zach Greinke, right? But we said there was 2 teams that would call all the time. Like every couple weeks, we'd get a call, and it was the Rangers and the Brewers. And they said, we'll do anything for Greinke. We want Greinke, we need Greinke. And Dayton always said, okay, but we need a shortstop. We need your best prospect. Both of you have 2 of the best prospects in the game, which was Alcides Escobar at the time, and Elvis Andrews, who's now on the Rangers. And before we do any deal, it has to include them. And both of them would always say, no, we can't do Escobar, we can't do Andrews. Okay, well, we can't have Greinke. But he had a list at all times for every organization. And we would know kind of what the value is of our own players and what was a fair ask. So we're always prepared for what could come. But going back to Greinke, they kept calling, Then we had a deal done with the Nationals that was at the winter meetings, and Zach actually was only going. He had a no trade clause, and he was not going to accept the trade unless they got an extension worked out, and they couldn't do it. But I think the fact that we almost moved him got the Brewers a little nervous, and so they immediately called and said, "All right, you can have Escobar." Within an hour, it was done because we knew everybody else we wanted. We never exchanged any other names. But we knew we need Escobar, we need Lorenzo Cain, we need Jeremy Jefferson, we need top pitching prospect, which was Jake Odorizzi. And Odorizzi at the time was an A1. But we knew we needed the top pitching prospect. And so we had that list done, and then it just kind of fell into place, literally within an hour. So you do the work ahead of time so that if there really is a deal to be made, the discussion has to be had. And if there's a deal that's close to be made, there's enough dialogue going back and forth that they know the expectations of what we want, we know the expectations of what they want. And so they're not as difficult as like someone calling and then everybody scrambles and kind of walks through it. If you watch the Moneyball movie or anything like that, it looks like it's a big deal, like we're all hunkered up in a room and we're playing magnets and we're watching video. We have meetings all the time and conference calls all the time, and we kind of know every organization. We have people, our analytics department, big on just pulling that information and having lists done so we know what our fair asks through that process. So again, my job is a lot more boring than everybody probably thinks it is. But a lot of it's just the work ahead of schedule that makes those things just kind of happen.
So to treat every player in your organization as your own son, so how much does that affect your salary and trade negotiations?
Great question, really good question. With contract negotiations, we don't talk to the player, luckily we talk to the agents. And contract, the arbitration process, anything salary related, is kind of because we're dealing with a union and it's under a collective bargaining agreement, a lot of the salary structure and framework kind of sets itself up. And it's best explained through the arbitration process. So the arbitration process in baseball is different, and if anybody's studied arbitrations or even really knows arbitrations, it's really different than most any other arbitration. Most arbitrations in the world would be, hey, this company wants to sell this percentage of its company to this guy in shares, and they don't want to go to court and have it worked out, so they've agreed to go to arbitration, and they both put their cases on the table, and that guy decides what to do. He could pick he could do anything. He could say this guy gets 20%, this guy gets 40%, this guy gets all of it, whatever. It's like being a judge. In baseball arbitration, it's this process where the club sets a number, the player sets a number, and you go in front of a panel of 3 arbitrators, and you have to argue comparable players. So if we were in an arbitration with, say, Hosmer, we would not really talk that much about why Hosmer shouldn't get that money. We would talk about Hunter Pence, or we would talk about Lucas Duda, whatever it is. We would talk about players who were most comparable to him, and their salary should dictate what he gets. So it's kind of a different process. It's really not even talking about the player. It's talking about how he compares to other players, and that should be why the arbitrators should be doing this. For instance, if a player, if in that scenario, Hosmer filed at $11 million and the team filed at $9 million, the midpoint at $10 million is really dictates the entire case. So in player arbitration, you now try to find, if Hunter Pence got $10 million and $5 and Lucas Duda got $9 million and $55,000, we'd be arguing that he's more like Lucas Duda. They'd be arguing he's more like Hunter Pence. and it really doesn't matter. Whichever the arbitrators think that he's more like, he would get the $11 million. He wouldn't get the $10,100,000. He wouldn't get Pence's salary. You just have to say, yeah, he's most like him, and he's above that midpoint. So it becomes that. So contract negotiation is a little bit different now because you don't have an arbitration panel. But you kind of look at in negotiations and say, you know, he's a lot like, you know, Salvador's a lot like Buster Posey at this age, and Buster Posey's contract was 5 years in this, whatever it is. And so you work off other existing contracts to kind of dictate what's fair for this player. Great question.
Do you think the Royals are going to have to go through like any major rebuilding processes in the next few years?
Yeah. I mean, we're actually always rebuilding, and the level of the rebuild is what is really the question. But in our market, being a small market team, we have to. We're always kind of going through it, and really it dictates currently with our team having all players, like 6 players, are about to be free agents. That's the level of rebuild of who we're going to end up signing long term, and who are we going to have to move. And if we're going to be free agents, when do you move, if at all? And the way we're playing now, you know, it really dictates. You know, you don't make any decisions till July, but you know, we're not playing very good right now, so you never know where we're going to be in July. We got a lot of ground to make up right now. And we will. We're better than we've been showing the last week and a half, but we'll get there. But yeah, but it's we're always rebuilding, and that's where, you know, back in '09, we were constantly doing a lot of trades and a lot of movement. That's what my job is really doing now. I mean, administration, our roster's been set for 3 years. I mean, we go out of spring training and we knew we had one bullpen spot and that was it. So it's been pretty slow for me.
How do you go about getting or scouting or getting a guy like Luis Robert or someone that comes from Cuba or Dominican, something like that?
So the international market is very different. Cuba's in the past has been a little bit different. I'm gonna go get my Cuban coffee. So Cuba, I'll come back to Cuba. The international market, everything not Cuba, and not Asia. That's got its own professional league. But everything, so Dominican, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Panama, Italy, we got an Italian player. Those players can be signed at age 16. And they, specifically in the Dominican and Venezuela, they don't play on teams, they're on leagues. They're starting to have these showcase events, which again has become a money grab by an agent. The dude's starting these leagues where they get the best players to come play and all the scouts come. And then the guy, it's awesome. Like, all of us should have thought of it, right? So he created this league, and so any player who played in this league and gets signed, he gets 4% of the contract, just for hosting the games. So every player who's coming through is playing this league. Okay, swimming in cash, it's unbelievable. But you don't have to do it. You just roll some balls out there and kids play. But the way it works are the agents in the Latin American countries, they have their own like academy programs, and then they're taking their players out to workouts at the academies like daily. Like when I'm at the academy, we'll have 4 to 5 players every day in the afternoon. Once our minor league players are done, they'll come. There'll be 4 or 5 players that'll have their own workout, and it's just like tryouts. And they'll just keep going every day to a different academy. And then somebody may be there, they like them, they sign them. It can be anything. The best players, well, they won't do that as much. They'll be more selective when they go. They'll make sure that, you know, the head of international scouting's there, or before that, or someone else. And then they'll make sure that their players, so like Vladimir Guerrero, if you guys remember him, his son just signed for $3.5 million with the Blue Jays. Those players are kind of outside of that. They'll have their own private workouts. But we don't know who they all are. And we know who they are at like age 14. And so you kind of have this relationship. You can have a player in the international market come stay at your academy for 30 days. So if it's a player who you kind of like, but you want to see more of, he can come to the tryout, and then he can stay and stay in the dorms and then work out with your team. You just can't wear the uniform. It's fine. So Salvador Perez was just signed. I was down there seeing him, but it was another player who we ended up signing. But, again, gosh, you guys are so young. You guys remember John Buck? Okay, so John Buck, we had a t-shirt giveaway. That was like a Tuesday night t-shirt giveaway. And I go down this year, a different kid, and a kid catching, all other kids are in uniforms, and he's wearing a John Buck giveaway t-shirt. Like, who's this guy? Like, I was a tryout. Like, so we just threw a John Buck giveaway t-shirt on? Like, yeah, all right. That was his uniform for a while he was there. But he, that was a kid we ended up signing. But some of these kids that we kind of like, but we want to see more of, we'll invite them to stay in the academy, and they can stay for 30 days and practice with us, so we have more time to make a decision. The really good ones won't do it. Their agents won't let them because they don't want the coaches and the staff to kind of persuade them to sign with another team. But the international market's just different, but it's fun. Like that, you can really compete. In America, you've got everybody goes through the draft, so you see all these players, you get to know them, you fall in love with a kid, and then he gets taken 3 picks before you pick, and you're like, I spent all this time investing in him and his family, and now he's going to go play for me. So, but the international market, you like the guy, you sign him. Miguel Almonte, who's one of our pitchers, he's in Omaha right now. Almonte, I was down there, we had a workout, and it was after ours, and he comes out, there's 3 pitchers, he was the 3rd pitcher to go. I remember it was like it was yesterday, and he got on the mound, and Texas had been offering him $20,000, he wanted $25,000. And he wasn't going to sign for 20, he wanted 25. But he gets on the mound, he throws 8 pitches, and our assistant scouting director, international scouting director, was with me. And he was, I mean, it was like lightning out. And we're like, oh, he wants $25,000, like we would have just given it to him on the spot. But the head of international scouting was coming the next day. So we stopped him. He got so pissed because he thought we just didn't like him. He got pissed, so we're like, no, we want you to spend the night at the academy. Tomorrow, FA, boss is coming. So we want you to throw tomorrow. And then he threw the next day, and the boss looked at our assistant sky director and said, why don't you just give him $25,000? This is absolute. So you get to just do that. You don't do that in the States. You see a guy, you don't just get to sign. But you get guys who are going to pitch in the big leagues for $25,000. Calvin Herrera got $6,000. Ventura got 20. Salvador Perez got $60,000. So there's guys getting $3 million, and then you've got guys getting $6,000. And like that's fun. Like just finding players down there, and that's a market that's be a little more regulated by MLB, but as long as there's no international draft, that will never go away. Cuba is a little different. They've got to defect. They've got to go through a showcase because they don't want a player to defect, and the club just sign them like that. They go through this like system where every team has to. They can't show up to a tryout unless every team's invited, and there's a lot more rules with them. And that's always been because of governmental relations. Like they had to be cleared by the American government before anybody could sign them because they defected. Since that's been lifted, we're still operating under that procedure. But that may change with what Obama did right before he left office with Cuba. For the time being, that's the same. And then in Asia, the international market, they have to be what's called posted. So they all play. You can't just sign an amateur out of Japan. He's got to play professionally, and then teams have to bid a money that just doesn't even go to the player, it goes to the club. And it's a silent, like, closed envelope bid. And sometimes that bid is 65, I think Matsuzaka was like $60 million just for the rights to negotiate with Matsuzaka, and you had to pay him. So it can be very expensive in that market too, but that's kind of the differences in international.
Who's like the youngest kid you've ever scouted, and do you think it's ever like too early for like that process to start with?
Well, I've known Bubba Starling since he was 11. So I used to watch him play bags, so I guess that was somewhat scouting. But he, it's when you know kids are good, you just start to watch them. So we started scouting Bubba when he was a freshman, more on the football field than on the baseball field. But you start to build those relationships again with the family. But that was easy because we were in Kansas City. He was in Kansas City. The 14-year-olds, because of the new regulations of baseball, you don't see them as much as the academy internationally. But at one time there was, I would see 14-year-olds. But mostly now the youngest I see is like the 15, 16-year-olds that'll be at like these junior showcases, perfect game events and stuff like that, domestically, or just kids for the international signing period. So it's like 15, 16 is kind of the age now.
Let's do one more question.
Since you deal with a lot of Latin American countries, is there like a language barrier? Like, do you guys speak Spanish?
Yeah, no, I don't. I understand Spanish. That's where I really get people. They think they're talking bad about me, but I kind of know what's going on. But I can't communicate. I can't converse. And that's just from being out. I wish I knew Spanish. If anybody wants to work in baseball specifically, just start taking Spanish. That's one thing I regret doing. I didn't bring this up, but when I switched out of journalism, was because I took, you had to take 4 semesters of Spanish for the language for journalism at the time. And my first first semester I took Spanish 1 and I got an A in it. I was like, all right, I got this. My second semester, halfway through, I was getting a D by the midterm, and I dropped it. And that was my, personally, don't write this down, that was my best semester of college, because I ended up like 9 hours for the end of the fall. That's great, I had a great time. But it, I ended up dropping into class, and then I'm walking through Fraser, and I walk by this TA's office. I'm like, oh, it's my Spanish TA. And the teacher's like, oh yeah, what's his name, blah, blah, blah. He's a health and human sciences major or something like that. No, what's like Western Civ? What's Western Civ? What is that department? You guys take Western Civ anymore? Oh god, that class sucked. You read like Plato and stuff. Like, it was terrible. But he was a TA for that. And they were like, they needed a Spanish teacher, so he taught it. He barely knows Spanish. Like, no wonder I was getting a D. But so I just stopped taking Spanish after that. I wish I would have. Yeah, it's a big language barrier. But we always have people with us who speak the language, and we don't obviously for football and we don't drive down there. But we don't go to Venezuela really at all anymore because of the unrest there. So there's a lot of restrictions that we have as an industry based on the cultures and what's going on in each country that kind of hinder us, but it kind of hinders everybody. But as an industry, we're able to work around it.
Great. Thank you.